You're listening to Bizzong on Project iRadio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
I'm listening to Project iRadio?
Yes, and did you know for as little as $1 a month, if you contribute to the Project iRadio Patreon campaign, you can get great things.
Like venereal diseases?
No, not like venereal diseases. For as little as $1 a month, you can get show rewards for your favorite Project iRadio podcasts. There are also ebook subscriptions and special rates on advertising.
Are there sex dolls?
No, there are no sex dolls on Project iRadio's Patreon campaign, but you can get postcards and signed show notes and exclusive short stories, all for as little as $1 a month when you help support the Project iRadio network.
I'll give you $1.
Oh, thank you.
Bizzong.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the Bizarre and Weird Fiction Podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank Songers. So good to see you back again. And since you're back again, I'm going to treat you to another wonderful, bizarre, and weird fiction writer this week, Zongers. But you know what we gots to do first. We gots to pay the bills, Zongers. And who do we pay the bills with? None other than subculturecorsets.com or just Subculture Corsets at the Avenues Mall in Jacksonville, Florida. You know about them, but I'm still going to talk about them once again, right? It says here, hey, Creepy McCreepersons. See, I don't say Creepy McCreepersons. I say, hey, Zongers, looking for something out of the box to wear? Then you better visit subculturecorsets.com. Subculture Corsets and Clothing carries all the unusual clothing and accessory brands for the steampunk, gothic, apocalypse, rockabilly, and pinup scenes. Or perhaps you're into Victorian goth. Whatever you freaks, see, I don't say freaks, I say whatever you Zongers are into, most likely, Subculture Corsets and Clothing will have something for you. If you're a curvy lady, Subculture Corsets offers sizes 4 through 4X. And men's clothing as well. So no excuses. Visit subculturecorsets.com now for the exciting new piece of clothing that's going to make you stand out. Or visit their store at the Avenues Mall in Jacksonville, Florida, just 1/2 of a mile off Interstate I-95. And when you're checking out at Subculture's website, don't forget, use the discount code Bizzong for 10% off your entire order. Entire order. You know what that means? While you're there, get everything you need, because when you buy more, you save more. That's subculturecorsets.com. Discount code Bizzong. Check them out. And also, if you're at their store in the Avenues Mall and you walk up to the register and you're about to swipe your card, you stop and you go, hey, Bizzong! And they're going to give you 10% off right there in the store, Zongers. What a steal, what a deal. They got great clothing. If you're going to cons and you want to look good and feel good, make a statement. Shop at subculturecourses.com before you head out to that con. I know Bizarre Con's coming up soon. Maybe you need a little something other than whatever it is you wear ready. I don't know. Get something nice for yourself. Tell them Bizzong, 10% off. That's what I'm talking about. Onwards and upwards, Zongers. We have got a heck of an interview for you folks this week on Bizzong. The interview is one of those people who I didn't have to do much work this week, Zongers. Not gonna lie. Our guest did so much of the work that I have all this energy to talk about with you at the head of the show. You know what I'm talking about, Zongers. Listen to me. Roll. I had to get it all out. He wouldn't let me talk edgewise, and that's fine. Love that, because when people have a lot to say, you have a lot to listen to. We're talking about the one and only Mr. David Agranoff, author of the new book just released, Punk Rock Ghost Story from Deadeye Press. Our friends at Deadeye always welcome on Bizzong, including David Agranoff. A man who, when I first discovered Deadeye, he was one of the first books I read in the Vegan Revolution with Zombies. A fantastic book in and of itself. So we're going to delve into David's writing, David's books, David's love for punk rock, and David's convictions about outlining stories and about saying, yay team, go team, supporting the community. He has a great deal of things to say, so I hope you've got time to listen to the whole thing in one shot on your way to work, in the gym, cleaning the house, maybe having a little kinky time. I don't know when you listen to Bizzong. It's okay if you listen to Bizzong during kinky time. Sounds kinky to me. As a matter of fact, I may make a rule. You're only allowed to listen to Bizzong during kinky time. But for now, whatever you're doing will do, as we give us the gong for David Agranoff.
I'm just getting myself a little centered here, but I'm ready to go.
All right, cool. We'll try to take your mind off things then.
Well, yeah, this is a great way to do that.
Okay, good. As you know, this is being recorded, so if there's any kind of glitches or anything, I can edit. No big deal. If you need to pause for anything, no big deal. We can do that. But for the most part, whatever conversation we have is, what goes out on the air. You listen to the show, you know what it sounds like. So other than that, I occasionally, I don't know, something's been going on with this computer. It just, all of a sudden, the audio will stop recording for some reason. So that may happen, and I may just stop you, and we'll kind of figure out where it cut off and pick out. But hopefully we won't have that issue tonight.
Okay.
All right. So
awesome.
I guess if you're ready, we can get going.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. It is my privilege to welcome to the show this week a man who is a pioneer, shall we say, in the weird horror sort of realms, at least the ones that I'm used to, because we have this week Mr. David Agranoff of Deadite Press fame, and he has just come out with a new book entitled Punk Rock Ghost Story. David Agranoff, welcome to Bizzong.
Well, it's really awesome, Frank, to be on Bizzong, listener, and really enjoy your podcast. So very stoked to be here.
Awesome deal. Now, I just got exposed to your new story, Punk Rock Ghost Story. Great story, and it's obvious reading the story that you are very, very deeply involved in the punk rock scene, at least of the 80s and 90s. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I grew up in the 80s, late 80s. In high school was when I was kind of around the same time that I got into horror, was the same time that I got into punk rock. So it was kind of at the same time, a little bit of overlap. Of course, things like the Misfits are a good gateway into both worlds. And for me, I've always been kind of somebody who liked being different, or the thing that nobody else liked. I was a big space nerd even when I was a little kid, and for example, I always did reports on the Russian Space Agency because I didn't want to have anything to do with NASA, and just to be different and weird. And so in that way, punk rock and horror really appealed to me, and so I got into both of them kind of around the same time.
Oh, sweet. And I got to ask, reading the story is basically about a touring punk rock band in the present day.
Yeah.
But so much of their story is so detailed and intricate. Were you a touring punk rock musician at some point in your life?
No, not me personally. Well, I've been in hardcore bands back in the day a little bit, and I was always really close friends with people that were in touring bands. I did merch every once in a while for example, there was an Indianapolis band, Burn It Down, that were good friends of mine, and I'd sometimes sell t-shirts for them. But I was really good friends with the guys in Earth Crisis when I lived in Syracuse. I always had tons of friends that were in touring bands. So just being the writer that I am, I spent a lot of time asking questions about what tour was like, not really necessarily knowing if I'd ever have a chance to use that. And thankfully, it really did pay off. And, when people would be telling stories about being on tour, I was always paying really close attention because it was just something that I just knew I could use it. And I did go on tour, especially a couple times. I went on tour with my friends, had a band called Rise Over Run. I went on tour with them over spring break one year, and so a couple of stories that that the band People's Uprising and Punk Rock Ghost Story were real stories and things that I saw happen. Like, for example, the first show when they show up in Dayton and it's a house party and it was already over, that happened to them.
Nice.
And, just little things like that. So I was just always trying to pay close attention. I think writers tend to do that.
Well, that's good because you really do. I would have swore, you were the guitarist in a punk rock band and you had done those things. I myself, I never really got deep into the punk rock scene in the 80s and 90s, but I always enjoy these punk rock fiction stories. M.P. Johnson's another fantastic writer who really grabs hold of the punk rock scene. And
he's great. He just edited a tribute anthology to the Misfits, Hybrid Moments, and I have a story in that collection. And just really excited to work with MP. And MP and I have talked about the connection between punk and horror for, over 10 years. He had a short story in a collection I edited a long time ago called The Vault of Punk Horror that's now out of print. But yeah, he's really good at punk rock fiction as well.
I love the fact that you two work together because you definitely complement one another's work, and you work in sort of those same realms, in this bizarre and weird fiction world that we're all in.
Well, and that's just, we both carry on the DIY attitude from punk rock into the writing. We believe in working together and helping each other out. So, we're constantly doing that. And, both Matt and I, we both come from the world of zines. We both did zines back in the day. And so his zine was a little bit more successful than mine. But, and most of my zines were activist related or political, and his were more straight, covering punk rock. But we both have that background in DIY zine making, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Bizarro community appealed to us, because the Bizarro community is so collective in so many ways.
Now, you both came up in and around within the last 5 years. Were you aware of each other's work in the zine world, in the punk world, before all this Bizarro came about?
We've known each other for, internetly speaking, for about a little bit over a decade. We traded, like I said, we traded stories back in the day. So long before both of us were published by Bizarro publishers. So we did know each other before then, and we traded. I think he was still doing his zine. I was already out of the zine realm, doing a blog at that time, but yeah, we've known each other and communicated since long before we were published authors. So it is really exciting to see. For example, I'm so ecstatic that MP won the Wonderland Award for Dungeons and Drag Queens, and I couldn't be more proud of him. And it's just really great that he's doing things like the Misfits anthology that's really tying punk rock and horror together, because that's, obviously near and dear to my heart.
So you yourself, in your earlier writing careers, before you got hooked into the Deadite and everything, you were already writing this horror stuff with the punk rock mindset.
Yeah, I was already kind of starting to do that a little bit, but my first collection, Screams from a Dying World, which was released by Afterbirth Books, was all environmental and animal rights themed horror fiction and science fiction. And so that particular collection had, it basically was all themed towards a lot of the issues that are very important to me politically still. And at the time, I just really wanted to do something that communicated my beliefs in animal rights and environmentalism, and which was awesome because that is what gave Carlton Millick and Rose O'Keefe the idea to approach me with. They basically came to me and said, "Hey, vegan books sell and zombie books sell. You should write a vegan zombie book." And at the time, I thought it was kind of a silly idea, but they said, hey, we'll give you 2 weeks to think of an idea, and you can pitch us the idea. And that eventually became my first published novel. It was the second novel, actually, it was the third or fourth novel I wrote. But the first I published, which was The Vegan Revolution with Zombies. And that's probably my most straight bizarro novel that I have. Of course, obviously it's horror too because it has zombies, but that book is more of a satire than anything, and it's really the only full-length humor or funny book that I've written. But definitely also very punk rock themed as well. So because a lot of the characters in the book are hardcore kids.
Yeah, very true. And like I told you leading up to this interview, when I first discovered Deadite, Vegan Revolution with Zombies was one of the first Deadite books I read and thoroughly enjoyed because it is so different. And it came at a point where, you know, The Walking Dead hadn't hit yet. The whole zombie craze hadn't fully just saturated the market, but it was certainly getting there. And
well, in one way that Vegan Revolution with Zombies was also ahead of the zeitgeist was that was before Portlandia as well. And the Vegan Revolution with Zombies is very much a satire of Portland itself. So in that respect, one could say that it's a bit of a mashup of The Walking Dead and Portlandia, but it existed before both those properties were on TV anyways. I know The Walking Dead already existed as a comic,
yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, I'm really proud of that novel, and also one of the things that is really interesting about the Vegan Revolution with Zombies is that it was reviewed in a peer-reviewed academic journal of animal studies for all the philosophical and ethical issues that and different ways that the novel examines the animal rights movement. And I'm really proud of that because in lots of ways, if you're not a part of the animal rights movement, those aspects of the novel will go straight over your head. Just like if you're an animal rights person and you're not familiar with zombie fiction or, say, juggalos, those aspects of the novel will probably go straight over your head too. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of with the Vegan Revolution with Zombies is that the book operates on several different levels. Because at the same time, if you don't know Portland, you're going to miss some aspects of the book as well.
I agree that book really did serve your purpose. Obviously, you have the animal rights thing is a big thing for you, and veganism. And what that did was a lot of times when people, want to put their agendas out front and stuff, I kind of tune out if I'm not really into it, regardless of, right or wrong. But, the soapbox thing kind of turns me off. And what I really appreciated about that book was that it had a playful sense of humor to it. And it didn't really shove anything in your face. It gave facts and everything, and it's all in the story. And the whole thing, it's just an easier pill to swallow for people who are sort of, across their arms and I don't want to hear this and get off your soapbox type of thing. So I think it really does succeed in getting your message across to anybody who reads it. And nobody's going to just throw the book down and go, this is a propaganda. I don't want to hear it. It's a very entertaining book, and you succeed in getting your message across. It's fantastic. I'm very proud that you got that into a peer-reviewed journal. That's fantastic.
Well, thanks. And look, there's two aspects to what you're saying that's really funny and interesting about the Vegan Revolution with Zombies is, for one thing, that when I turned in my first draft, I was actually a little worried that it was too preachy. And but I turned it in as is. And one of the first notes that I got back from Carlton when he read the draft was more meat as gore. And, he actually encouraged me to go for it a little bit more than I had in the first draft. And so that was kind of humorous. But one thing that was really funny to me, and I'm not a person, I don't like to read reviews or spend a lot of time obsessing. I know some people obsess on bad reviews, which actually, one of my pieces of advice for young writers is don't read the bad reviews so closely that, like, I've seen people that actually, like, start stalking their bad reviewers, you know, and trying to find things about them. But one of the worst reviews I got for the Vegan Revolution with Zombies was somebody said, this book is humorless and for vegans only. And literally the next day, I got a review from someone who said he was a hunter and that the book was one of the funniest books he ever read. And in that respect, I think you can't please everyone. You just have to, you know, write the book that you believe in and hope that, you know, people are going to come to it because, you know, I didn't really know whether I was overdoing the message or underdoing the message. I didn't know. I just wrote the book that I believed in and told a story that I believed in, and I'm glad that, you know, for the most part, people are just enjoying the story. And if a message comes out of it, that's cool. But I'm always a story first person. But just because of the particular worldviews that I have, and for example, this happened in Punk Rock Ghost Story. There's a very important theme and message to the book, but it's not one I set out to make when I started writing it. It's just one that happened. Uh-huh. And you know, we can talk about that more when we get into Punk Rock Ghost Story. But oftentimes I will set off stories that, you know, people will look back and tell me like, oh, I see what message you were trying to make, and a lot of times I didn't set out to make that point. They just happen naturally. You know, for example, like Boot Boys of the Wolfreich, my novel Boot Boys of the Wolfreich. I just wanted to tell a story about the skinhead scene, and like didn't really intend to explore the issues of how youth get into hate groups and things like that. But it, you know, it was kind of natural. Once you start telling the story, it's kind of impossible to not explore those issues.
Right.
And eventually I did. And but most of the time I don't really set out for it with a message, if you know what I mean.
I do, and that shows in your work. When you talk about those things, those themes, those issues that come up and you don't think about as you write, are you working off of some outlines, or are you kind of pantsing it? What's your style when you sit down and write one of these books?
Oh, Frank, you just set off a grenade, because I am a passionate 100% believer in outlining. I am, as much as Stephen King and Joe Hill are pantsers and believe almost religiously in it, I am the exact opposite. That does not mean that I don't stray from my outlines from time to time, but I'm a huge believer in, especially for those of us who have to work day jobs and you know, can't write full time. You know, it may be a couple days between when you're able to write chapter 20 and chapter 21. And I think having a map is really, really important for writers in our position, because I think it's really easy to, you know, kind of lose track of where you are. Now, in that sense, I also, as a storyteller and as a consumer of stories, I personally really love detailed, intricate plots. And for that reason, you know, a lot of my favorite writers are the ones who outline. Like, for example, F. Paul Wilson is absolutely one of my favorite writers, and he's actually kind of my outlining Yoda. I took a workshop with him through the Borderlands Writers Workshop, and I believe very heavily in you know, in the map. And I look at it this way, because, you know, a lot of people who are against outlining will say that they feel it's soulless, and I don't believe that's true. Just because you've looked at a map doesn't mean you've experienced a city, for example. And I think basically an outline is a map. And you still have a lot to tell in the story. And I always reserve the right to go off the outline if I think of something better in the moment. And a lot of times the last 3 or 4 chapters, when I'm going down the stretch, the outline becomes meaningless. I don't even need to look at it anymore.
I love outlining. You're outlining Yoda. That's fantastic.
Well, if anyone is unfamiliar at this point with the work of F. Paul Wilson, he's a New York Times bestselling author,
Yeah.
but he wrote 2 series. The Adversary Cycle series, which is 6 books, and the Repairman Jack series, which, if you count all the YA tie-in novels, has over 20 novels.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book, or the third book in the Adversary Cycle, is the first book in Repairman Jack. And the 6th book in Adversary Cycle is the 15th book in the Repairman Jack series. And think about the kind of plotting that it takes for those series to, on like 2 separate tracks, come together. And I just think there's a lot of plotting and storytelling that people can learn just from reading Dr. Wilson's work. And he's awesome. He's one of my favorite. He's one of my top 3 writers. So top 5 writers, he's up there.
Yeah, he's no doubt.
I just really appreciate his work.
How detailed do your outlines get? Because you keep saying, I noticed this, sometimes the people, hardcore outliners like you're saying, but you keep saying, to have that map. And I find that when people talk about having a map, they're less detail oriented. They're very rough sketches of where a story's going to wander. How detailed do you get when you outline before you even put pen to paper on the story itself?
It really depends on the project. But for example, with I like to, when I'm outlining before I start a book, sometimes I'll lay down on the couch. Sometimes I'll just sit at my desk with a notebook, or sometimes I'll do it on my lunch break at work, and I'll get out the notebook. And sometimes it's just bullet points, like Boot Boys of the Wolfreich. A lot of the chapters in the outline were 1-sentence bullet points. This needs to happen. That needs to happen. This is the point of view. Sometimes if I have multiple characters, I'll make a note of whose POV is happening, because I believe in having a rhythm to the point of view shifts. So I want to keep a regular pace of the point of view shifts. So you'll have one chapter with this character, one chapter with this character, and so we have like kind of like, for example, if we have 3 point of views, I want to make sure that we're switching back and forth every 3 chapters. And I want to make sure that, and towards the end, a lot of times you have to have each point of view end with a cliffhanger. So even though it may be 3 chapters before you get the solution, that can really push a novel forward. And that's really important to me as far as plotting. That's something I really believe in. That being said, I have a novel that's not yet found its forever home that I co-wrote with Edward R. Morris, who's a Portland science fiction author. He wrote the Blackguard series that came out from Wildside Press. There's 2 books out so far, and Edward and I wrote this science fiction deep, like kind of space opera noir novel called Flesh Trade. And Flesh Trade, because we were writing the novel together, 2 different people, the outline for that is incredibly intense. Because we did it together. We'd sit down at a cafe and do 15 chapters at a sitting. And the book has over 60 chapters. It's 125,000 words. And that outline ended up being over 20 pages long. And that way, it didn't matter who started which. We would take turns. One would start one chapter, and then the other author would start the next chapter. But it didn't matter who started the chapter. We had a very detailed idea of what we were going to do from each chapter to the next. And so, like I said, it depends on the project. But for that particular one, we were really serious about it. And also, I should note that, we reserved the right to go off the outline at times, less so when we were working together, but sometimes we would shoot each other a message if we were working on a chapter and say, hey, I think this character should do that, or this or that. Are you okay with it? And we'd communicate with it. And I had a really great time writing that novel with Ed. We're still looking for the right home for it, but I hope that's going to be my next big project to try to get that one out into the world. So I hope next time we talk, I'll have more information on that.
That sounds great. I myself, when I write, I kind of like I'm in between. When I do shorter stuff, anything like 5,000 words or less, I just completely pants it. But when I do sit down and I know something is a bigger idea, I definitely make that map, that outline, and run with it. And like you said, it's fluid and it can change, and it always does. I don't know of anybody who does preach about outlining that doesn't say like and stick to it and you'll never go. There's always room for.
Well, and I do write short stories for the most part by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
I mostly. However, my last collection, Amazing Punk Stories, there are a couple novella-length stories in there. There's one story at the end called Last Show at the Mortuary Collective, which is about a haunted punk rock house, like a house where they have shows in the basement.
Yeah.
And basically the setting of the story is that these kids buy this old mortuary and throw shows in the basement. And that one I had to outline. Also there's a short story in there called Reunion Show, which is one of my favorite short stories I ever wrote, because it's like this really weird tribute to Philip K. Dick and Ian MacKaye at the same time. Which is really weird that, the founder of Straight Edge and, like, one of the most drug-abusing science fiction authors at the same time. But I'm the weirdo who's a big fan of both. And so this story, Reunion Show, is a very Philip K. Dick-style story, but it's a tribute to Ian MacKaye. And so the weird thing about that story was that was a very complicated short story. And even though I normally write short stories by the seat of my pants, that one I knew because of the weird structure with it. I sat down beforehand and made sure, and I did bullet points for this has to happen, this has to happen. And I'm really proud of that story. It was in Dark Discoveries before it was in the collection, and I do think it's one of the best short stories I ever wrote. And one of the reasons why that story works, I think, is because I outlined it. And that being said, some of my best short stories I didn't outline at all. There's a short story in my first collection, Screams from a Dying World, called Grampy's Spirit That Never Was, that a lot of people tell me is their favorite short story that I ever wrote. And I had absolutely zero plan for that one. And that one's just as complicated in its structure. I just was able to do it all in one sitting. And that was kind of key for that. But for example, all the novels are definitely outlined. And one of the things that's really interesting, well, maybe it's interesting. I find it interesting. I don't know if anyone else will find it interesting, but I have written probably 12 novels. I have 6 books published, but I have a stack of notebooks that are filled with outlines for potential screenplays, novels, novellas, probably between 200 and 300 outlines for different novels that some I'll probably never write, obviously, but I enjoy the process of outlining so much that a lot of times what I'll do is I'll outline a novel, and if I keep thinking about the story years later, then I think to myself, well, that's one I need to write. And for example, Punk Rock Ghost Story just came out, this year. The first time I outlined it was in 2007. And, it kind of sat in my notebook for a long, long, long time. And, that can happen with some of my novels. And every once in a while I'll pull one out. I just recently pulled out an outline for a YA novel that I outlined in 2003 that may be the next thing I work on. But I, looked at the idea. There was a couple things I tweaked, but mostly I was like, yeah, this is as cool as I remember. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes I think to myself, ooh, I'm so glad I didn't try to write that one. There's some pretty bad ideas in there. And some that I've kind of made fun of I wrote a novel a couple years ago that still I haven't found a home for, called Demons of Winter, and there's a writer character in there, and he's the author of, in the fictional character is the author of a couple novels that are based on bad outlines that I wrote back in the day.
Oh, sweet.
So I was able to use them in some sense, but you know, a lot of times you learn a lot by writing some of these projects that you end up that you're not able to sell or not able to move for one reason or another. I have one particular screenplay that I wrote many years ago that is just one of the. I just can't even believe I spent months working on it. But at the same time, I was able to use one of the scenes, kind of adapt it into the novel that I wrote with Ed. And so you never know. But you know, Ray Bradbury had that saying that you know, new writers need to write 1,000,000 words, and when you write 1,000,001, you'll be ready.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times that's part of that process. So
I'd like to circle back to the idea you had before of just the themes that constantly that come up, and of course you mentioned a theme you weren't expecting that came up in Punk Rock Ghost Story. My guess would be the theme of, I guess it would you call it nostalgia in the punk scene? It seems like punks always pine for the old days, no matter where they come from. They always pine for the old days. Is that sort of the thing you're looking at?
You're on to something. You're close. You're really close to what I was trying to do. Yes, being stuck in the past is a huge part of punk rock. And, like, look, all of us old punk rockers, like, we look at, like, the scene back in the day and, you know, yell at people to get off their porch and, you know, can't believe how much, you know, better punk rock was before the internet. And, and I'm one of those people. I definitely believe punk rock was better back in the day. And being stuck in the past, what better vehicle for talking about a scene or a movement that's stuck in the past than a ghost story, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And so what was really interesting is that, you know, and, you know, whenever you're writing about a scene that is real, like punk rock, you're going to have a little bit of mashing up reality and fantasy, history and fiction. And so what I wanted to do was take this band from Indiana, this legendary band, the Fuckers, who have this mystery surrounding them. And nobody knows what happened to Frank, the lead singer of the band. He disappeared on tour in the summer of 1982 after they played a show in Houston, Texas, and was never seen again. And so where I come from in Indiana, the mystery of the Fuckers was always like something we talked about, because here's this hometown or home state band that, you know, kind of came and went like a supernova and, you know, had this one record and disappeared. And then, you know, what happened to them? Well, we don't know. So I wrote this kind of framing story involving this fictional band from 2006 who goes on tour in the Fuckers' old tour van. And so on the surface, if you look at Punk Rock Ghost Story, it's a haunted punk rock tour van story. Instead of a haunted house, we have this van that the Fuckers took out on tour in 1982, and now this band in 2006 is taking this van out on the road, and things happen. But really the theme that I didn't expect, you know, in the beginning I just really wanted to tell the story of a haunted punk rock tour van because I thought that sounded fun. And I wanted to explore the, you know, like, hey, what happened to Frank? But really what the novel became about, the longer you got into it, was the difference between punk rock and before the internet, before it became mainstream, because let's face it, punk rock is mainstream now, with bands like Green Day, or even like grunge bands like Nirvana. Like, it changed, like, punk rock in the 80s, if you were walking down the street and you had a mohawk, people wanted to kill you, right? like rednecks and jocks wanted you dead. It was warfare in the streets, basically. And now, if somebody's walking down the street with a mohawk, nobody really notices. It's like, whatever. Yeah, because you see those kids on TV. You have Hot Topics in malls. You know, punk rock has become a part of the fabric of the mainstream. So it's not just that. I mean, we have the concept that, you know, the DIY scene and booking shows and all that did get better, right? The DIY scene was somewhat democratized by the use of the internet. Like booking a punk rock tour is definitely easier in the age of the internet, right?
Yeah.
But the scene itself is not as dynamic. It's not as weird. It's not as crazy. It's not, you know, it's very different. And so the theme of Punk Rock Ghost Story, it's using the ghost story as a method of exploring punk rock then and punk rock now. That very much became the theme, and that's why you'll see there's a quote at the beginning of the book from, well, there's two quotes that are really, really important at the beginning of the book. There's a quote from Greg Gaffin of Bad Religion talking about, you know, how crazy the old school was, and there's a quote from this old Cleveland hardcore band, Face Value, and the line is, your 87 is our 82. It makes no difference what we've been through. And what he was trying to say was, he's a guy who was around, the singer of that band was around in 82. And this was a record that came out in 88. And he was saying, like, if, you know, you got into it in 87, I got into it in 82, it makes no difference. You know, we're all coming into it together. But what's really funny is, at that time, that was a true statement. But if you came into it in 82 and he came into it in 2006, it's very different.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the things that I really wanted to explore with the novel. And, you know, and I hope the novel does that, mostly through the lens of the band from 2006. But
yeah, I think that does it perfectly. You captured what you were going for sure. It's an interesting story because, you know, it's got the title right there, Punk Rock Ghost Story. So you're waiting for the ghost story, but so much of the brunt of it is exploring the thing you're just talking about, that the nostalgia, the you know, from their point of view, the thing that, you know, punk rock is more real in this fashion than it is today, and they're reliving that through the ghost story that occurs in the story. And it's fantastic that you just use a van instead of like a house. It's, you know, how many haunted tour vans stories are there in the world?
Well, you know what's funny is that this story, this concept, you know, kind of before I thought to include the fuckers into this story, I had wanted to write a haunted punk rock tour van story for the Vault of Punk Horror, the anthology we put out in, I want to say 2004. But when we got close to putting out the anthology, we didn't have a Lovecraftian story, and so I decided I needed to write a Lovecraftian story for that collection because I didn't want the collection to come out without a Lovecraftian story. And it's not one of my better Lovecraftian stories either, and I kind of wish, you know, I'm glad I didn't write the Haunted Punk Rock Tour van story at the time, because the more I thought about it, that's when I thought to include the fuckers story. And once I did that, like, the story expanded greatly. And, you know, so we have this documentary that we made alongside of it. It's not exactly the same as the book, because what we did was we did interviews with, you know, Dickie, who's the only surviving member of the fuckers, Lizzie Plague, who was at the Warehouse Riot, which is the riot that takes place during the Philadelphia show that the fuckers played in the summer of '82. And also just, I got to interview some of my favorite musicians from Indiana who were around back in the day, to talk about, like, the impact the fuckers had, even with that one 5-song 7-inch, which, by the way, if people want to look up their music, the fuckers songs are online on YouTube. It's the fuckers with an asterisk instead of a U. and you can also watch the documentary online. It's 21 minutes, and if I haven't completely sold you on the book, at least check out what the band went through. It's free. You can do it on YouTube and check out the music. They have really hilarious, like awesome old school punk rock songs like God Hates Sports and Conformity Factory and Carter Sucks, Reagan Swallows, and just, which were classics of Indiana punk rock at the time. And, and some of the songs actually, that they actually do play a role in the novel. So really glad that, we were able to make sure that those were online so people could hear them.
That was in total, it was a really brilliant technique, because when I sat down and read the book, and obviously you first read about the fuckers in the book, you build a story off of this band from Indiana back in the early 80s. But their story sort of remains obscure because you're living it through the Popular Uproar. What's the name of the band?
People's Uprising.
People's Uprising. You're living their story through their eyes. So you're not really getting history, but you get that sense, like you said, of that they were this thing at a point in time in Indiana, and it makes you very curious about it. So when I was done with the book, and I just discovered this earlier today, is the video you said you put out. It was a great, one of those rockumentary, behind the music type style documentaries on the fuckers, and it was it was a fantastic piece of a compliment. It's a nice compliment to the book, and like you said, if you're not really into the book, you can still watch this and get an appreciation for still what the book delivers. This love of the punk rock scene and all the behind the scenes stuff and the feel from back in the day. It still sells the same concept, and if you watch one and not read the other, you'll probably want to read the book, and vice versa. And I gotta look up the fuckers' music now. I didn't even know that was out there.
Well, it's a part of you heard the songs, a couple of the songs as a part of the documentary.
Right,
so, because there are 3 songs that are I think played almost in total during the documentary. But one of the things, and I'm really pleased to hear you say that, because I made the documentary with my friend Larry, and Larry and I spent, mostly Larry because he did all the editing, because I have no technical ability at all. But, we watched a couple punk rock documentaries before we made this, and there's definitely a style and a vibe to the punk rock documentary.
Yeah. And
so we definitely wanted to capture that, that feeling. And, I'm going to put this mostly on Larry. He did a wonderful job, of cutting, this together. I mean, I was sending him footage for months, and we weren't quite sure what we had at first, and but I think it is a really good companion piece to the book, and so I do hope people will check it out. The documentary itself was a labor of love that took months to make. So just as much as I wouldn't say it took as long as it did to write the book, but yeah, it was something that was really important to us, and we were really excited to put that out there. But look, I always try to do something. Frank, if you've been following any of the stuff that I always try to do something interesting every time I release a book.
Yeah.
Eraserhead released my first novel that I ever wrote was a novel called Hunting the Moon Tribe, which was basically Chinese vampires, and it was a kung fu movie / Monster Mash kind of crossover. And I'm really proud of that book. But so, for example, when we released that, we did a trailer park at a theater in Portland, where for the release party, where we showed an hour and a half of kung fu and horror movie trailers, like hilarious kung fu movie and horror movie trailers cut together. And that was a really good time. It was really fun. And for Boo Boys of the Wolfreich, we did. I had a friend in England who recorded two Oi songs for the soundtrack that were original songs, theme songs to go with the book. And for the Vegan Revolution with Zombies, we made a film-style trailer for that. So all those are out there on YouTube, and people can find them out there. But really fun stuff, and I think it's really up to the authors in this day and age you got to find ways, like with a book, we are up against all the entertainment in the world. We're up against movies, video games, TV shows, football, basketball, whatever kind of entertainment you want. And if you want to get somebody to sit down and read your book, you really have to find creative ways to sell that concept or that product to people, to say, hey, my story is different, my story is unique. There's a reason why, I committed to this story. It's the reason why I want to tell it. And for that, you really have to find ways to separate yourself. And you can't just do a cover reveal on Facebook and, a lot of authors will just send 1 million friend requests out and immediately say, hey, like my page. Well, you got to do more than that.
Oh, yeah.
You have to separate yourself. And, look, and I know there's a lot of other writers that listen to Bizzong, and I'm not saying I'm, the guru of marketing or whatever, because there's definitely writers that have a lot more sales than me. But, we as a community in that, Jeff Burke, my editor at Deadeye, and I talk all the time about that struggle where you're competing against all the entertainment in the world. And that's one of the reasons why we're really hard on ourselves for a concept. When you sit down to try and write a book or sell it to somebody, you really have to look at the material and say to yourself, like, am I going to be able to compete with everything in the world? Right? Do I have something that's interesting and unique enough, a story that just needs to be told? And, I have novels that I've written that I love personally that I'm not even trying to move or to sell, because, for example, I was talking earlier about, I have a horror novel called Demons of Winter, which is like another horror novel about a horror writer. I love the novel. I'm very proud of it. There's a lot of things that I think are really good about it, but I'm not so sure about marketing that novel. Will it compete with the rest of the world? And I think a lot of times writers could do themselves a favor by making that judgment themselves, like really thinking about, how do I separate myself at this time and make a unique and interesting story? And I think that that's really important discussion that we as a community need to be having, especially in the Bizarro movement, because, man, if you can't separate yourself writing Bizarro, then,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And look, we don't need the 30th, I don't know, the Jesus dildo salesman or whatever. We don't need that at this point. There's a reason why I think some of the authors that are in the Bizarro movement have kind of, segued into totally different stuff from the stuff they were writing early on. Look at Cameron Pierce or even Carlton Millick. A book like Quicksand House by Carlton is very, very different from Fishy Flesh or Baby Jesus Butt Plug. And, I think that kind of growth and evolution is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it's pretty essential. Like you said, you can only write so many versions of the menstruating mall before you just become a caricature of yourself. So it is important to.
Well, and look, we've got great stuff coming up. Don't get me wrong. When I say, you have to compete with everything in the world, look at a novel like Skullcrack City by Jeremy Robert Johnson, right? That is an amazing piece of work.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. That novel is just fantastic. And thankfully, Jeremy is really making, he's making good on that, and people are finding it and finding, how crazy, unique, and awesome it is. And, sometimes there's novels that I just, that are just that amazing and should be able to stand up to it that don't have the sales that they should. You know, I'm a huge Kodiak. Cody Goodfellow is absolutely one of my favorite authors. The fact that A Perfect Union doesn't sell more than it does, you know, really bothers me. I think it's one of my top 10 horror novels of all time.
Right.
The concept in it is just absolutely genius. And, you know, I absolutely think Cody is one of the best writers of our generation. And, you know, I know that there are a lot of people out there who have read A Perfect Union or Repo Shark, but not enough. Because those books should be, I personally, I think those should be bestsellers, you know, in this world. You know, it's not fair. But, and I can say that because I'm not Cody, but, and I really believe in the guy. But at the same time, you know, like, look, this is a struggle that's been happening for a long time. I think John Shirley is John Shirley is my favorite writer in the world, and my biggest influence. And, you know, I had the honor to work with him on a screenplay last year, called The Rubber Smile. And, John wrote the introduction to my book, Amazing Punk Stories. And I think John, even as far back as 1978, was writing bizarro science fiction. Look at his novel Transmaniacon. Transmaniacon is a just whacked out bizarro science fiction novel set in future Portland, right, with flying bug cars and all kinds of crazy shit. That book is so ahead of its time, so amazing, and just like a lot of John's work, it just doesn't get the recognition it deserves. And, you know, we, as a community, I believe in the bookosphere, promoting the bookosphere. That's why I'm talking about all these different authors that aren't me, right?
Yep.
Because I believe as a community, we need to be working together to promote each other's work. You know, certain authors, like, really just believe in that. John Skip, for example, has done amazing things to promote a genius writer like Laura Lee Barr or Autumn Christensen, and, you know, Danger Slater, who, you know, John's put all three of those writers out with his Fungasm label, and, you know, he has really taken it, you know, on his shoulders to lift these writers up. And, you know, we need to do more of that. We need to, as a community, promote the bookosphere. And because that's the only way we're going to see this community grow, when we're competing against the TV shows, the Sunday night footballs, you know, all these things. And so, yeah, I'm sorry to preach on, but, you know, I really believe in that. That's one of the reasons why, like, on my blog, I review every single book I read. You know, that's 69 books this year that I've read. And so, already. And I just definitely believe that, you know, by doing these types of things, by posting on Goodreads and putting your status updates on Goodreads on your Facebook and your Twitter, you're sending a message that reading is cool, reading is awesome, and that we're reading each other's work. You know, I just finished Molly Tanzer's Vermilion. Mm-hmm. Holy cow, that book is awesome. I just said holy cow. Sorry. But really, Molly Tanzer, you know, and look, Molly and I have very weird things in common. We're both vegan, and our first novels were both about Chinese vampires. That's really odd. And we didn't know each other when we were writing those books. So, you know, it's just kind of a weird coincidence, but very different novels, mind you. But you know, Vermilion was just an amazing read. And, you know, these are people that are in our community, and it's just, you know, this is a kind of a go team moment, but, like, I just really hope that those who are out there listening to us right now, whether you're, like, in your car on your way to work, or if you're working out, if you're on a walk or whatever, I really hope you feel real energized about promoting the books in this community, because that's one of the things that's so awesome about what we have. Like, I'm passionate about Jeremy Robert Johnson and Laura Lee Barr and Cody Goodfellow, Sarah Pimborough are some of my favorite writers. And I just love to open and expose people to these works that have never read them before. And we should feel really excited about that because we have an opportunity to do that. And I believe that that's good karma because I think that, you know, when people see, if other people see you, whoever's listening to this right now, if they see you out there promoting their work, if you eventually become a writer, or if you're putting out books, they're going to remember that you helped them, and they're probably going to help you back. And, you know, you got to write a good book, too, you know, let's be clear. But, you know, that's one of the things that's awesome about and tying back to the punk rock ethic, you know. You know, back in the day, one of the ways that old touring bands used to get shows, and this is well documented in Punk Rock Ghost Story, is if you lived in Indianapolis and you had a band, you would do a show for a Black Flag and trade for a show in LA, for example. Or let's say DRI is coming through and they're from Houston, Texas. You'd say, I'll give you a show in Indiana, you give me a show in Houston. And so we need that kind of attitude with the book promotion between the writers and readers. If you want to keep seeing good books by authors that you like, say Cody Goodfellow, Jeremy Robert Johnson, Laura Lee Barr, or myself, any of these writers, if you really like the books that they're putting out, you really, in this day and age, we need your help. We need your help spreading the word because, you know, it's not easy in this day and age to keep putting the written word out. So, yeah, sorry. Go team.
Go team indeed. It is those exact convictions and principles that you were just speaking about so passionately is why Bizzong exists. I have a microphone and I had an awesome opportunity to become part of the Project iRadio network, which reaches a great big audience that I wouldn't normally be able to reach on my own. And I said,
right.
This is what I want to use that platform to put out there to say, hey, this is happening in books and, you know, all the horror stuff is happening and that's fantastic and I love it all too. But there's this cool thing happening and not a lot of people know about it. And I really, really, really believe in this stuff. And I really, really, really hope that I can drag somebody else in by talking about it, by having the people that write this stuff come on the show and just listen to their passion and their excitement and how much fun they're having doing this stuff. And from what this show has grown over in almost a year, I've exposed Bizarro to a lot more people who wouldn't necessarily have known about it because of that. It's great stuff.
Well, right, and look, that's one of the ways that, I mean, I listen to the horror show with Brian Keene every week. And that's one of the ways that I discovered Bizzong, you know, through Project iRadio. And, you know, just tying back into that, Brian's also a big believer in the Bookosphere. And when Brian was here in San Diego on the Pressure Tour, you know, we hung out with Brian. And one of the things that was really cool that came out of that hangout session with Brian is a bunch of the writers that just came to the reading and went out to dinner with Brian afterwards. You know, we're putting out an anthology together, just the dudes that were hanging out that day with Brian, because we were sitting around talking about how we all had stories that were in anthologies that fell apart at the last minute. So we all had, there were 6 of us, and we had 6 homeless stories all of a sudden. And it was just kind of a funny coincidence because, you know, anthologies, like, fall apart all the time. And we had, I think 5 of the 6 of us all had stories, and then the 6th writer just said, hey, I got a story I can put into it. And now we have this book coming out called San Diego Horror Professionals, edited by Ryan C. Thomas, because the 6 of us were just sitting there, and Ryan was like, hey, I'll put it out. I'll put all the stories together. And what was really cool about it is that now we have 6 writers that in San Diego that are working together on this project to make this happen, to help each other out, to promote each other. And that came out of going to Brian's event, you know, and just being there to support Brian, but at the same time, when the writers all got together in the same room, they were able to help each other. And I think that's a huge part of, you know, what I believe. I know that's what Brian believes. And, you know, Brian said some really nice words on his tour journal about his visit to San Diego and seeing how energized we were to work together. And we have a massive horror community in San Diego. We actually have 3 tiers of it, like 3 different scenes. And there's that of different writers who we're all trying to congeal together. And we also have an awesome film fest every year called Horrible Imaginings that happens every year in September in San Diego. And one of my writing partners, Anthony Trevino, and he's the author of King Space Void, which just came out in the new Bizarro author series. Anthony and I are now in charge of the literature programming for Horrible Imaginings. And so this last year was the first year we had author guests. And we did a campfire-style reading out on the lawn in Balboa Park, which is our beautiful, grand, old, you know, over 100-year-old park in the middle of San Diego. And it was just totally awesome to have. We had Brian Evenson, John Skip, Laura Lee Barr, and Cody Goodfellow, and Ross Lockhart reading by, like, kind of a fake campfire. And it was really neat to see the writers come together. And I just, you know, totally believe in that. So, but you know, that's I could preach on that all night. I'll try to stop.
Well, unfortunately, David, we've come to the end. The hours go so quick, you know, when you have.
Absolutely.
So
you got Rose back. That interview with Rose was way too short.
It truly was, and I must have talked to Rose for maybe another close to 2 hours after that interview ended, and it was like one of those, why didn't we just keep recording moments? But I'll definitely have Rose back.
She's a really smart lady, and one of the things that, you know, it's funny because you know, so many times with Rose, like, she'd give me pieces of advice that sometimes I didn't understand what she was saying. Like, for example, with Punk Rock Ghost Story, I had a different title originally. It was a terrible title, and she just kept saying, "Oh, come back to me when you have a title. Come back to me when you have a title." And you know, she was right. And eventually, when I came to Punk Rock Ghost Story, it was so obvious. But I was just so glad that she pushed me. This is like, no, your title's not good enough.
Yeah,
you'll come up with a better one. And she was right.
She just knows what she's talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
Smart lady. Very happy to be working with Eraserhead and Deadite. They've just they've definitely been very good to me, and I'm proud to be a part of those of the collections of work. I know Punk Rock Ghost Story is actually Jeff Burke's 100th book with Eraserhead Press.
Look at that! What an honor.
Yeah, number 100.
There you go. Well,
so, anyways, let me just give a plug for last plug for my website.
Yes.
I have a blog. It's davidagranoff.blogspot.com, where all my book reviews. It's mostly my book reviews, but also updates on things that are going on. You can always like my page on Facebook, or you know, I accept pretty much any friend requests from people. So if you want to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, I'm at D. Agranoff author on Twitter, and you know, just any help that I can get from the bookosphere out there to promote Punk Rock Ghost Story, I really appreciate the support of anyone who buys the book. I really hope you like it. It was a labor of love. Worked on it for 9 years off and on, and just really excited to release it to the world.
Yeah, indeed. And really, any Zonger out there who doesn't finish this interview and go onto Twitter and Facebook and share the shit out of everything David Agranoff has to say after his impassioned Go Team speech, well, just shame on you. That's what I have to say to those Zongers out there. And to you, David Agranoff, I have to say thank you for being part of our team, because it is clear you are a vital piece of that puzzle, not only for writing great, weird horror stories, but because you have a passion for the entire genre and the community, and it's clear you want to see everybody get big and popular and famous and get their just desserts.
Yeah, and last note on that, and this is gonna sound like I know how this is gonna sound, but any writers out there who want to send me hard copies, I'm not a big e-reader, but if you want to send me hard copies of books, I review everything that I get. But here's the thing, I give honest reviews.
That's how they.
So, sometimes, but then again too, I've also made the offer to people that have sent me books like, if I don't like it, I will let you know ahead of time. And, you can choose to pass on the review or not. But that's part of my belief of promoting the work. But I do give honest reviews, and I just definitely, it's a part of my belief in the book sphere. So, go team.
Absolutely. You, sir, are a kindred spirit. I believe that honest reviews are the only reviews that are meant to be had. I want to thank you once again so much for joining us on the podcast. And, of course, when you get that next big thing come out, we'll be sure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And bye to all the Zongers out there.
There he is, Zongers, Mr. David Agranoff, the punk rock horror hero of bizarre and weird fiction. He's got great books. If you like, we talked about it early in the interview. If you're into like MP Johnson stuff, you're gonna love David Agranoff. And if you love David Agranoff, you're gonna be into MP Johnson stuff. Two different types of writing styles for sure, but they both have that punk rock sensibility to their stuff, which, like I said, I'm not really a punk rock guy per se, but I do love punk rock fiction. It comes off as just really something very heartfelt and almost romantic in a way because of their passion for the whole vibe, the whole scene. So I really enjoy that stuff, and I hope you check out Punk Rock Ghost Story. It's an excellent, excellent story. It's a haunted tour van, like punk rock tour van, so it's really cool. Zongers, don't forget, we are available on social media to keep up with everything that we do here on Bizzong. That is facebook.com/Bizzong. And we are also at Bizzong Podcast. And we're on Instagram. I just started up Instagram, posting those doodles that people seem to like, posting the doodles over there on Instagram as well. And while you're checking in with us on social media, of course, we always like it if you rate and review the podcast on Stitcher, on iTunes, or wherever you may listen to. And, of course, share out the links when you see them on Facebook or retweet on Twitter. But also engage us on social media. We want to know, I say we. I'm Bizzong. It's just me. Let me know. Let me know who you want to hear on Bizzong. I've got people I talk to and everything. There's people there's bizarre writers out there I'm trying to reach out to, and they're not responding to me for whatever reason. They don't regularly check their stuff, or they just don't know who the hell I am or what Bizzong is. So let me know who you want to hear. And if there's a writer out there that you talk to and you really want to hear on Bizzong, let them know you want to hear them on Bizzong. Tell them to reach out to me, and we'll talk. That's great ways to get the word out there. Definitely, every episode we do, we bring in the fans of those writers, and those fans discover Bizzong, and that we're exposing the community. And there's a lot of writers they enjoy outside of that particular writer that's on that week. So each week the show and the audience grows, and that's awesome. That's the Bizarro community idea, right? So engage and like us and review and do all those wonderful things that David Agranoff was talking about. It applies not only to books and writers, but to Bizzong and podcasts as well. So that's all we have for this week, Zongers. And now you are free to go to listen to these other great Project iRadio podcasts.
Ladies and gentlemen, Project iRadio presents the Mondo Method.
An old man with a goatee teaches a younger guy with a beard how to write.
Starring the mentor, Mondo Guerrero. And from parts unknown, up-and-coming superstar, the Great Buddha.
Okay, Okay, so their names are really Armand, Rosamilia, and Chuck Buda. And old man Armand is going to teach Chuck how to write a book. And maybe you too, while they're at it.
Featuring marketing morsels by Aaron Sweet El Meharry.
Exclusively on Project iRadio.
Watch out. There's a new terror taking over kitchens around the world. Thrills, chills, mad cooking skills.
It Cooks, a weekly podcast brimming with recipes, tips, food finds, seasonal specials, and guests galore. Hosted by horror author Amber Fallon. Hey, that's me. A foodie with over 20 years experience cooking, baking, and generally making a nuisance of herself. You've watched Food Network, you've read cookbooks, but nothing can prepare you for It Cooks, coming to a device near you.